Hi guys, thank you for joining me. Oh, today's case is a heartbreaker. I'm just gonna throw it out there before I even start. Also, I am at the moment sponsoring my own videos because I've got my book, The Serial Killer Next Door, that's out in all good bookstores, and you can get it online as well, and it's coming out in America shortly. In fact, by the time this video goes out, it might well be out in the States, and you guys have made it a bestseller, and I just wanted to say a massive thank you because I can't do this without you, and I only wrote it because you asked for one, and it took me a long time to get around to doing it, and I'm really grateful to every single one of you. Also, if you're in the UK and you'll catch me at one of my shows, I'm doing The Serial Killer Next Door show at stages across the UK and theatres. I'm also bringing to you killer cults and next year killer couples, and it is absolutely brilliant seeing how many of you are coming to see me in killer couples next year. I'm so excited to be bringing this one to you because it is an area that I am just so fascinated by, full stop. Also, I hope you enjoyed all my extra content on Patreon and my YouTube membership. You guys are amazing. Right, with all of that said, let's talk about today's case, which is one that has left me full of rage. That is the only way I can describe it. I know that lots of you have struggled to have children. I struggled to have children. I've been blessed with 3 children, thank you God. Every single day I count my blessings because it was hard being blessed with these babies. And so many people don't get to bring children into this world, and they go out of their way to foster and adopt and become parents in any which way that they can because they're good, compassionate, loving human beings who want the best for children. And then you hear of people like Adam Montgomery, and it turns your stomach. It literally turns your stomach because you sit there and you think to yourself, how do these excuses for human beings get blessed so easily, not just with one child, but with countless children, and just never find it in their hearts to actually value those children as the gifts that they truly are. And in the case of Harmony Montgomery, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Harmony Montgomery, she was born on June the 7th, 2014. She was a beautiful little girl. She did have sight problems. She was partially blind in one eye. Some reports say that she has some behavioural issues. I would say that there will be no way that she had any behavioural issues. If she had any behaviour concerns at all, it will be symptomatic behaviour traits because of the fact that she was living in an inhospitable, horrible situation. And that's what we see with children who are living in truly inhospitable situations. If they're dealing with abuse, if they're dealing with the chaos of constant transitions and dysfunction, if they've got parents who are, shall we say, dependents on things like alcohol and drugs, of course, their behaviour is going to be problematic at times because they haven't got the emotional capacity to express themselves on a verbal level regarding how they are struggling. So they take on certain behavioural traits because they're trying to manage a situation that is unmanageable for them when they haven't got the capacity to manage it appropriately as you would maybe when you're an adult. So this is completely in context. When children are described as having behavioural difficulties when they're very young, often just look in the direction of the primary caregivers and, oh, there you go, you have your answer. She was this little blonde beauty. Her mother talks about her being a real sassy individual. She was someone who genuinely lit up the room, and she had a personality that was not just full of independence, but also full of kindness. And I think personally, kindness is the most imperative trait that any human being can have. It's one that Harmony's father, Adam Montgomery, obviously didn't share, but certainly where Harmony is concerned, she is full of kindness. So Harmony Montgomery's parents were Adam Montgomery and Crystal Sorey. They were reportedly together for a few years before their relationship came to an end, and I think from the get-go it was a very tumultuous relationship. They had struggles involving substance abuse, there were legal issues, criminalities, so all of these lead to, shall we say, a very chaotic environment. Whilst they were together, Harmony's environment would not have provided a secure attachment base. Both of the parents were apparently cycling in and out of legal problems, and they were very much struggling to have any gainful employment. So by the time that Harmony is 1 year of age, she's been born into chaos, and then her parents go through a separation. After they break up, Harmony is basically in the care, for the most part, of Crystal Sorey, her mother. But bear in mind that Crystal has a lot of problems with substance abuse, and that means that DCF get involved early on in Harmony's life. And that's a good thing because understandably a child needs a secure base, and if there are issues with dependency and a parent is not fit to take care of that child because of their own issues, then DCF need to get involved to make sure the welfare of the child is paramount. Now, Crystal had a lot of issues with addiction. She had struggles with heroin, other drugs, and that brought her into conflict with the law. It impaired her ability to provide a stable environment for her daughter. And even though I think she was doing the best that she could at the time, we all agree that that's not ideal. But it doesn't mean that the automatic resolution for this is to take somebody like Harmony and place her with the other biological parent, because as you'll see in a moment, Adam Montgomery is certainly not the kind of parent that you would want to be around and has not actually been an active part whatsoever in Harmony's life. Adam Montgomery had a really troubled past for a start. He'd got a lengthy criminal history, he got charges of assault, he got charges of robbery, drug offences, he'd been charged with domestic violence. So there's a hell of a lot of reasoning as to why you would not place a child with him. And those violent tendencies, they're going to mean that he's erratic. They're going to mean that he has the potential to be a really dangerous figure in Harmony's life. And like I said, one of the big issues here is that Adam hadn't really been actively involved in Harmony's life at all. He was often incarcerated. He was often dealing with his own struggles. So they haven't built any tangible relationship. Also, because of his own substance dependency issues, he had issues around opioids and other narcotics, he is certainly not going to be a safe space for any child to be sent. Now, because of that initially, Harmony is placed in foster placements, and this happens on a few occasions, but it eventuates in there needing to be a more solid space and base for Harmony, because Crystal eventually loses custody of Harmony. They felt that she was providing a problematic environment, and therefore they need to get a place where Harmony can have a secure foundation. Obviously, I would not be telling this story if that had actually happened, if Harmony had been placed in a secure place, because ultimately what occurs is that she's sent somewhere that is totally inhospitable, totally inappropriate, and unfortunately results in her death. And it turns out that one of the most disheartening parts of this story that I'll go into a little bit later is Child Protective Services didn't bother to carry out an appropriate assessment. And that means that in October 2018, Adam Montgomery had basically sought a review and redetermination hearing because he wanted to have Harmony placed in his care. Bear in mind, he had never actually had custody of his daughter. So it really doesn't make sense that that hearing is taking place. But nonetheless, that request for a court date is granted, and unfortunately it's slated to be held on the same date when her mother, Harmony's mother, who'd actually previously requested the same kind of hearing, was actually scheduled to have her own custody hearing with her other son. So she can't be present. So that means the report states that only the girl's father shows up, so only Harmony's father comes, and it makes it look like maybe she is somebody who is not going to be able to look after her child because she's not turned up to the actual court hearing. But it's down to that problem with both hearings taking place on the same day. So that means after that hearing in February 2019, Harmony is placed in the care of Adam Montgomery, a man who's demonstrated a history of violent behaviour, drug abuse and criminal activity. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, when you think about the kind of appropriate human being to be around a child, what I've just described sounds perfect, right? Somebody with major drug issues, violent history, checker past, regularly incarcerated. I mean, he sounds absolutely the ideal candidate to be a parent. And also, what I find really frustrating is that there was another perfect option for Harmony, and that perfect option would have seen her placed in a very loving and very safe environment. And even more importantly, in that beautiful environment I've just described, she would have been with her younger half-brother, Jameson. Now, Jameson and Harmony were incredibly close. And for the first 4 years of Harmony's life, Jameson and he shared this really inseparable bond. They were each other's world. And We want to keep families together. We want to keep siblings together because at the end of the day, that's a relationship that can take them through the rest of their lives. And Blair Miller, who actually later adopted Jameson, along with his husband, a guy called Jonathan Bobbitt Miller, they actually spoke about how unbreakable the connection was between Jameson and Harmony. Jameson, of course, is very lucky in this situation, isn't he? Because he officially becomes part of the Miller family in November 2019. And in that period, they had a celebration marking his birthday shortly after because he's settled in, he's thriving. And what they don't realise during that celebration, during that period of time where they're just thrilled that they've got this little boy, he's part of the family, he's doing well, they're celebrating this birthday, is that literally around the same time, unbeknown to Blair, as Jameson's life is just beginning to offer the sanctuary, the security, the stability he deserves, that Harmony's life is literally coming to a brutal end a mere 50 miles away in Manchester, New Hampshire. This is so unbelievably tragic and also so unbelievably avoidable. Because Blair wanted Harmony, and Blair and his husband would have provided an environment where Harmony and Jameson could have grown and thrived and had a future full of love. Wouldn't it have been amazing if Blair had actually been allowed to adopt Harmony, to reunite with her brother? But instead, when they actually make that request, it's just met with this really unfortunate response from the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, because they decided Harmony is being placed with her biological father. Now, bear in mind, the DCF had been involved in Harmony's case since June 2014. They'd never conducted a full assessment of Montgomery, even though he had this extensive violent criminal history. He'd been in and out of Harmony's life with literally no consistent visitation pattern. In fact, he'd only accumulated 40 hours of supervised contact with her over a 4.5-year time period. 40 hours! 40 hours? And yet they've decided that this guy with no assessment is the right kind of person to look after Harmony, who's already gone through so many transitions, that he's a better fit than being with a loving family with a half-brother. But that's what happens. They believe that he's going to be an appropriate adult and parent. Even the basics of Montgomery's ability to parent were actually left unquestioned. The assessment just didn't look at it. Critical questions about his job stability, his housing, his capacity to care for Harmony, none of these were pursued. Also, they didn't have a court-appointed child advocate for Harmony. Now, that's really important because you have this independent party who's looking at this situation and saying, you know, I'm the voice for Harmony. That might have actually changed the course of her fate. Bear in mind, as I've said, Crystal Surrey, the mother in this case, wasn't present during the custody hearing because of the scheduling conflict, so she couldn't speak for Harmony or the relationship that Adam Montgomery and she had as parents to Harmony and the problems that they encountered, including his dependency. So all of these missteps actually arrive at a point where Harmony is being sent to the most horrendous situation possible for her. So he's awarded full custody. It's as simple as that. And another problem is that there are these interstate policy discrepancies between Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children, the ICPC, is a policy that's designed to ensure safe placement for children who are moving between states. So the premise of this is they require background checks and home studies. However, the application of that policy just fails in Harmony's case. So the Massachusetts judge does request an expedited ICPC review to basically examine whether Montgomery is suitable as a guardian in New Hampshire, but New Hampshire failed to act on the request, and the ICPC's never completed. When you think about gaps and falling through, it should have a picture of Harmony because, my God, did she fall through those gaps. So this failure basically means that Harmony is effectively sent into a home without a completed safety assessment. And it's not a safe place for her to be sent. And it's very shortly after she moves in with Montgomery, with this birth father who's apparently wanted to have her in his life, in spite of the fact of not being present at all. And I believe this is more down to his desire to control. He doesn't want somebody that he doesn't know having access to his biological daughter. So even though he doesn't necessarily want her, he would rather take her away from her half-brother and a loving home just to maintain control. And it doesn't surprise me at all that pretty much as soon as she goes to stay with him, abuse begins. And this isn't seen by people who've got an issue with him as a human being. This isn't seen by strangers or neighbours. This abuse is noted by Adam's own uncle. So in July 2019, Kevin Montgomery actually reports Adam Montgomery to New Hampshire's Division for Children, Youth and Families, the DCYF. He says, look, I've seen Harmony, she's got black eyes, and I can tell you now she's being subjected to abusive discipline. And he said, listen, Adam Montgomery, her father, has actually openly admitted to hurting Harmony. And yet DCYF hardly attend. And the visits that they do are basically cursory at best, and I would say negligent at worst. During one assessment, for example, a DCYF worker sees Harmony literally very briefly. She's leaving in a car, and yet that worker marked the visit as sufficient to dismiss any concerns. Hasn't spoken to her, hasn't actually looked at her physically, has just caught a glimpse of her and decided that they're going to mark down that everything's fine. That speaks of a lazy, good-for-nothing worker who actually cares little about children and everything about, I don't know, going and having a McDonald's. Honestly, that's what we're talking about. You know, some people go into these careers because they have a genuine vocation, a compassion for children. Some go into it because, you know, they fall into it. Some get into it and become disillusioned and just lose any empathy and compassion and just want to get through the day as best they can, not really caring or being concerned for the children they're meant to protect. That really happens. We see that all the time in work. Whatever career you go into, there's some good, there's some bad, there's some ugly within it. And certainly I've just demonstrated an ugly individual in that description. Now bear in mind, the man that we're talking about, Adam Montgomery, gains custody of Harmony in the February of 2019. This guy who apparently wants to give his child a new home. And yet, by late 2019, so the same year, we're talking a matter of months, aren't we? She's disappeared without a trace. But as I've said, no one's going to raise the alarm for 2 years. And the reason that people start realising that Harmony has just vanished into thin air is because in September 2021, her mother, Crystal Surrey, she starts making efforts to locate her daughter. Now, we can all agree she hasn't done a great job as a mother up until this point, and I am sure that she would 100% nod her head and agree, but she's got clean. She's trying to sort her life out, and you know what? That speaks to me. When there is a parent who has gone through their problems, has had their pitfalls, has lost intensely in lots of different ways, and then they start getting themselves together and they realise that as they're coming out of that stupor, as they're reaching their sobriety, oh my God, I've lost my children. And then they start to fight because they love their child and they want them back. That comes from a really good place, in my opinion. And I genuinely think that she was trying her best to at least have some kind of relationship with Harmony. She may never have got her daughter back, but just to have that contact so that Harmony realises that she did nothing wrong and that the mother in this case takes responsibility for the fact that she lost custody, and to make Harmony be aware that she's a good child. It wasn't her who caused the issues. She wasn't abandoned because she did anything wrong. It was the failings on the parents' part. She's sober. She's trying desperately to re-establish contact with Harmony. Now, despite repeatedly attempting to reach out to Adam Montgomery, well, it should be very simple, shouldn't it? It should be a case of, I want to have contact with my child. And as a father, even if you have issues with your ex, the truth is it's best for your child to have a relationship with both parties. And if you're a good parent, that's what you're going to try to encourage. But instead, she's just getting rejected every time she tries to have a conversation with Adam Montgomery about where Harmony is. Bear in mind, Crystal at this point hasn't seen or spoken to her daughter since a FaceTime call on Easter in 2019. So months have passed and she's desperate to re-establish contact. So because she's not getting any joy from the parent, Adam Montgomery in this case, and she's starting to grow concerned about why he isn't allowing her contact. And I guess in her head, she's got a range of worries though. Is he trying to parentally alienate me from Harmony? He's got this new relationship with Kayla, his wife. He's had other children. Is it just inconvenient to have me as an ex around that family unit? Does he just want to remove me from Harmony's life entirely because it's more convenient? You can imagine her thinking that way. And then you can also start to imagine the dread, that sense of, hang on, he's not even letting me have calls with her. This seems really odd. So you've got on one level the more, I suppose, analytical, obvious side of it, which is saying parental alienation, he doesn't want me to have anything to do with my kid. And then you've got the other, that motherly instinct of, has something truly horrible happened to my child? So she ends up reaching out to the New Hampshire Division for Children, Youth and Families, and they begin to figure out, do we know where Harmony actually is? Is this mother telling the truth? Has this child simply disappeared? And if so, we need to start investigating. So in December 2021, bear in mind this is 2 years after Harmony's apparently not been seen, the DCYF report Harmony is missing to the Manchester, New Hampshire Police Department. They then open an investigation into the child's whereabouts. Now at this time, bear in mind Harmony would have been around 7 years old, but it turns out as they start to investigate, she hasn't ever been seen again since 2019. So the last time she was seen alive, she was 5 years of age. So with this in mind, the police begin to attempt to locate Adam Montgomery. He's very well known to the police. They know who he is. And I suppose at that moment in time, they think there's probably a very, very reasonable explanation. They deal with things like this all the time, where parents are trying to exclude another parent from the child's life. They probably think they're going to rock up, Harmony will be present, he'll need to have a lecture about how it's important to make sure that another parent has access to their child, and so on and so forth. But that is not what's going to happen. And from the get-go, it is absolutely breathtaking watching Adam Montgomery with the police. So on December the 31st, 2021, police end up finding Adam Montgomery, and he's living in a car with his partner, Kayla. So he and Kayla are literally just housed in this car because they've lost their apartment, basically. So it's a completely inhospitable place to actually be anyway, and it's a very strange state of affairs. When they start to speak to Adam Montgomery, it is actually deeply frustrating to watch. The interaction, I would describe it as highly belligerent. It lasts for 45 minutes. The police are so highly reasonable, there's a bit of me that wants to go, just be nastier, because they're just being very respectful with a guy who's refusing to engage, who isn't helpful at all, and is almost arrogant and superior in the way that he treats the police. He comes across as an absolute POS, it's as simple as that. It also is clear from the very get-go he's got no consideration or concern at all about his daughter's welfare. And you can automatically feel that this is a man who's schooled in how to deal with the police. He's a career criminal, and it shows. Now, when he's initially questioned about Harmony's whereabouts, I would say he comes across with very conflicting and vague answers. He does, as he's pressed, tell the police that she's alive and fine, but what else is he going to do? I mean, he's not going to say, oh, something terrible's happened to her, she's not going to be seen again, because that will immediately implicate him. So, of course, he has to say she's absolutely fine. Police officer says, swear on your life. Now, this always makes me kind of giggle, because if you have a conscience and somebody says, swear on your life, you may choose to employ that conscience and not say, okay, I swear on my life, for fear that, I don't know, a big hand's going to come down from heaven and just strike you down and then send you in a little lift in the elevator all the way down to the burning pits of hell. But if you don't have a conscience, if you don't resonate in such a way, if those kind of morals and ethics don't apply to you, then of course you're going to be like, yeah, I'll swear on my life. Don't get me wrong, in that moment where he does indeed swear in his life that Harmony's okay, I do wish that that hand, a bit like, you know, the National Lottery adverts in the UK, it could be you, actually does come down from heaven and strike him down saying it is you. But apparently that doesn't happen, only in my head. Now, what he goes on to say when he's getting pressed by the police is that Harmony basically was picked up by her mother at Halloween in 2019. So now, not only is he saying, oh, I don't know where my child is to some degree, but I know she's okay, I know she's safe. He's now saying, well, the reason I know that she's safe, well, at least I think she's safe, is that her mum came in 2019 around Halloween and just took her away. Now, of course, this doesn't make sense anyway, because bear in mind, apparently this guy has petitioned court to get custody. He's wanted to bring Harmony home. He's finally got her. And now we're expected to believe that her mother turned up, he just handed her over, and off she went, never to be seen again. But this is what he says, that Harmony's with her mother, Crystal Story, in Massachusetts. And the thing is, that's a big red flag for investigators because this clearly contradicts Crystal's own reports that she hasn't seen her daughter for over 2 years. And if Crystal had done something untoward with her daughter, she wouldn't be pressing to try to find out where her daughter was. It would be counterproductive to her crime. So we can count her out at this point. She hasn't seen her daughter. She wants to see her daughter. She hasn't had custody of her for a long time, and she hasn't had visitation for a long time. And now she's being told, well, apparently you have your daughter, which is going to terrify her because she knows she didn't pick up her daughter at Halloween. She knows she hasn't seen her for 2 years. I can't even begin to imagine the dread she must have felt when she had that bed back to her. So he's giving all of these contradictory explanations, as I've said, saying that Harmony's mother's picked her up, but also he says that he dropped her off somewhere, that she's living safely with someone else, just things that don't make sense. And none of those claims can be substantiated. Now, police speak to Kayla Montgomery, who's Adam's wife, and she's equally as inconsistent. She initially says that Montgomery was right in saying that Harmony had gone home to the mother, but then she ends up confessing that actually she hasn't seen Harmony since November or December of 2019. So none of this makes sense to investigators. But Kayla basically says, look, I didn't see anything happening, but what I can tell you is in 2019, Adam Montgomery said that Harmony had been returned to a biological mother. So that's what she's saying. She's kind of corroborating Adam Montgomery without saying, oh, I absolutely saw this play out. I absolutely saw this happen. It's more about second-hand information. Harmony was there, then she was gone. And by the way, Adam Montgomery said, this is where she's gone. And I don't know, I'm a loving partner, so I haven't questioned him. I didn't say, well, that seems very strange, considering she was meant to be starting a whole new life with us. I just was like, oh, okay, Harmony's gone then. We get to January the 4th, 2022. Now, at this point, police make an official statement and they say that Harmony is missing. They launch a public plea for information, and the public are also informed that this isn't a case of a little girl going missing right now. This is a case of a little girl who hasn't been accounted for in over 2 years. And they just start putting her image everywhere, just desperately trying to locate her. We get to January 6, 2022. Now, Adam Montgomery at this point has just been so frustrating to investigators. He is just not willing to converse with them. He just constantly is letting them know, unless you're arresting me for something, you can't speak to me, I don't want to speak to you. And just genuinely being the opposite of what any concerned parent would be. Because bring it down to the bare bones of what we're talking about. Adam Montgomery knows his daughter is missing. Adam Montgomery knows that his daughter has been missing for 2 years. Even according to his own testimony, she hasn't been present in his life since 2019. So if your child had disappeared off the face of this earth, how would you be feeling? How would you be acting? You'd be desperate. You'd be going out of your way to do everything that you can to bring new light to this investigation that can hopefully mean your child will be returned. You're not going to be defending an ex, for example, who you're saying has taken that child. You're going to be insisting that the investigators absolutely do their due diligence and take Crystal Story's story apart to prove that she is a liar and that she indeed had Harmony. If you're not doing that, it's because you know there's no use doing that, because you know that you've lied about the fact that Crystal had Harmony, full stop. And if you're doing that, it's because you have something to hide indeed. So the way he's acting is so off, and investigators see that immediately. So on January the 6th, 2022, he gets arrested and charged with felony second-degree assault. So they can't get him in for her disappearance at this moment in time. They can't get him in for potentially being responsible for her death, which they're definitely suspecting at this point in time. They can only get him in for something that they have some evidence he was involved in. And they do that for the alleged assault in 2019 that obviously he was accused of by his uncle. And also they bring him in for charges of interference with custody and endangering the welfare of a child. So basically they've got him off the streets and they're hoping that it's going to give them some kind of in breaking him down to admit what's happened to Harmony. Like I said, that assault charge, it was based on the prior report made by Adam's uncle, Kevin Montgomery. He'd informed the police about the incident where Adam had allegedly given Harmony a black eye. Kevin Montgomery actually reported that he bashed Harmony around the house, and the reason for that was that she'd misbehaved, And he said that one of the things that was very clear to him was the way that Adam Montgomery disciplined, it was just so extreme. It was harsh and it was highly abusive, and it really was impacting on him as a human being witnessing it, and he had to go ahead and speak to the authorities. So following Adam Montgomery's arrest, he just is so belligerent, that's the word I'm going to use. He's highly uncooperative. He just refuses to provide any information on Harmony's whereabouts, which is again blindsiding to me, because if you're innocent, you're just going to tell the police everything. You're going to tell them anything that you know to hopefully mean that your child will be brought home to you. If you're just saying no comment, if you're refusing to engage with them, if you're kind of playing and treating it as a game, then it says something so fractured about who you are as a human being. It says something about your broken personality without a shadow of a doubt. And it's clear to me when I see the interviews with him and the investigators that he is an individual who's just deeply callous. And also, there is a level, I would say, of him enjoying knowing that he's got the power and control to some degree. So even though he's been arrested, even though he's incarcerated, even though he's having to do these interviews, I feel that he has this superiority and arrogance, and his belief system is this: if there is no body, there is no crime. You have to think that that's his mindset. If there is no evidence that I've harmed my child, then there's reasonable doubt. We all know that it's challenging for any prosecution to bring a case where there is literally no forensic evidence, where there is no body that's been found, where there is no absolute witness testimony that puts that person at the scene of the crime. All of these things are deeply problematic for investigators. He knows that. He knows that. And so it's something that he's almost enjoying when he's being interviewed, because he feels he's got one up on the authorities. He feels that the very thing that they need, Harmony's body, he's never going to give them. And he believes that by pushing that and pushing that and pushing that, by refusing to have any engagement, just saying, you know, there's no body, I've had nothing to do with it, I'm innocent, that he is absolutely going to get away with it. And this is a guy, like I said, who's got a career criminal history. So he is well schooled and well versed in how to act in these situations. Now, throughout the police questioning, he basically maintains what he said earlier, those very conflicting claims about where she's gone. He's never clear, he's never consistent, but he never describes anything actually happening to Harmony, just essentially that she's gone. She's no longer with them. Now, of course, the police aren't going to let this lie. You know, I would say that one of the things that we see where detectives and investigators are concerned is when children have been harmed, or when they suspect children have been harmed, they are dogs with bones, and rightfully so. We need these investigators to go above and beyond, to do everything in their power to make sure that children who vanish in these ways are given a legacy of justice, and rightfully so. So, of course, they might not be able to get anything out of Adam Montgomery, but there's always Kayla Montgomery. So they also interrogate her. And they are provided, shall we say, with things that give them additional concerns, such as she admits, yes, Adam Montgomery is a harsh discipliner. He's somebody who is quite abusive, and she herself had seen signs of physical abuse. So it's compounding the fact that Harmony was in a very challenging and dangerous situation. I would say that initially, however, Kayla Montgomery is not forthcoming about what happened to Harmony. In fact, she says when she's initially investigated and interrogated, in fact, she corroborates exactly what Adam Montgomery has said, saying that Harmony was with her mother. But we get to January the 10th, 2022. Now, at this point, Kayla Montgomery gets herself into a little bit of trouble, shall we say. So she's arrested and she is charged with welfare fraud. And the reason for that is she continued to collect food stamp benefits on Harmony's behalf for over a year after Harmony wasn't living with them. Now, she said to the police, oh, I knew that she wasn't living with us from 2019. She'd gone back to her mother, but she didn't have the knowledge enough to stop claiming these food stamps. So she's committed acts of fraud. So now Kayla's got herself into trouble. Now, bear in mind, whilst this is all going on, the backdrop of this is that the investigators are continuing to search for Harmony. They're combing through evidence, they've done interviews, they're searching properties connected to Adam Montgomery. This includes homes where they've lived, places they've stayed with family, storage units that they might have used. So they are extensively trying to figure out what's happened to her and to connect the dots to bring her disappearance back to Adam Montgomery. But despite these really extensive searches, literally there was no trace of Harmony's remains. And at this point, even though she's presumed dead, it is very frustrating for investigators, because how can they press charges as far as murder charges against somebody like Adam Montgomery unless there is evidence to do so? But of course, they're not going to let this lie. And then in August 2022, finally, they get the major breakthrough. At this point, they tell the public that Harmony Montgomery is indeed deceased, and they charge Adam Montgomery with second-degree murder. Now, the reason for that is because Kayla Montgomery, who's now dealing with her own charges and is probably thinking to herself, I don't want to be taken away from my freedom, and there's a chance that that freedom is going to be removed from me. She's thinking to herself, this is going to be deeply problematic for my future, for my life. And she's also, I imagine, had a period of time away from Adam Montgomery, and maybe her life is feeling slightly less abusive, shall we say. So she starts to cooperate with the authorities. And of course, she doesn't get immunity, shall we say, but the authorities say, listen, if you come along and you give us all the evidence that we require to make sure we can bring charges against Adam Montgomery for the disappearance stroke death of his daughter, we will not charge you with anything more serious than you're dealing with right now. So she's basically offered a plea deal. And so she tells investigators, okay, I've been quiet, I've been silent, I haven't told you the truth, but I'm going to come clean now. Adam Montgomery beat Harmony Montgomery to death in the fall of 2019. So she tells them he killed his daughter. Now, according to Kayla's testimony, this incident occurred between late November and early December 2019, but the belief is she was murdered on December the 7th. Now, Adam reportedly flew into this violent rage. Now, what's really upsetting about why he flew into that rage is because Harmony had soiled herself. Now, anybody who's worked with children in trauma, and I know that you guys who watch this kind of content regularly and my content will be aware that when children are struggling, often that comes out in symptomatic behaviours such as wetting themselves, soiling themselves, because when they're dealing with trauma, their body reacts accordingly. And often that can mean that when they're scared or when they're withholding because they don't feel they're allowed to ask to go to the toilet, in the end, they soil themselves or wet themselves. And it's happened before, and he can't bear the fact that she's done this. And he sees it as a behaviour issue, that she's purposefully and willfully doing this to upset and attack him. So as opposed to seeing this child struggling, as opposed to reaching out to her with compassion and understanding, he gets absolutely incensed. And then he just strikes her repeatedly. He punches her over and over and over and over again. Bear in mind, there are 2 other children in the car at the time this is happening. So he and Kayla also have their own children, and they're present. Kayla said the abuse that she witnessed in that moment was brutal and unrelenting. He just hit her over the head multiple times with a fist. Kayla said that after he had finally finished this absolutely brutal assault, he said the words, I think I really hurt her this time. I think I did something. Yeah, I think I really hurt her this time. So clearly, he's harmed her many times, but this time he realizes he's potentially gone too far. As if there's ever an acceptable point to abuse a child, that as long as you don't kill them, well, it's okay. But if you kill them, then it's too far. As if that is your benchmark for going too far. Abusing a 5-year-old little girl. Just put that in mind. Because when I say words, sometimes I think that because I'm telling the story and the narrative of what's playing out, it's easy that we forget the actual image of what we're talking about. We're talking about a 5-year-old little girl, this grown-ass loser of an excuse for a father, this big guy, full force, beating her with his fist. How could anybody of that age survive such a brutal attack? After Harmony has been brutalised in this manner, Kayla said that for a period of time, they could hear these weird moaning noises, and the very fact that she says weird moaning noises means that there is something atypical. Those sounds are not in line with just an injured child. They're in line with a dying child. At this point, she's lay on the floor of the vehicle. She's obviously gravely injured. Then he moves her onto the back seat of the car. She's battered, she's bruised from head to toe, essentially, but she's not dead at this moment in time. And then he covers her with a blanket, and they just drive around with her in that condition. They don't get help. She's making these odd noises. He's acknowledged and admitted that he feels he's gone too far this time. Do they do anything to help her? She's obviously in agony. She's obviously very badly injured. She's distressed. And yet, Adam Montgomery and Kayla just carry on with their daily routine. In fact, they drive to a Burger King. They eat. She feeds her the kids. Harmony's dying in the car, and they're filling their stomachs. Then they go to a friend's apartment to get drugs. They leave Harmony at this point unattended in the car throughout those errands. And according to Kayla's accounts, they didn't immediately realise that she'd actually died. In fact, instead of tending to that very sick child, Montgomery and her go and use heroin and fentanyl. In fact, it's only when their car, which is a Chrysler Sebring, breaks down that she, at that point, and he discover that Harmony's not breathing and has indeed died. Now, at that point, what is the right action? Even though it is horrifying that he has done this to his child, still, you pick up the phone and you call the police. Kayla could have done that. Adam Montgomery could have done that. Yes, he's going to be in serious trouble, but he has to acknowledge and take responsibility and accountability for these actions. He's killed his daughter. But of course, Adam Montgomery is not going to do that. And I would say Kayla doesn't want that to happen either. Essentially, they have tortured this child in her final moments by leaving her unaccompanied. She's died alone, in agony, on the back seat of a car whilst they get high. But no, even at the point where they realise that she's dead, all they care about is hiding the crime. So over the next 2 months, Adam Montgomery basically goes to enormous lengths to dispose of Harmony's remains. And ask yourself that question, why? We know why. He was doing it because he knows no body, no crime. If he can make Harmony disappear completely, then how will they ever pin the murder on him? Initially, he takes that gorgeous little girl's broken body, places it in the boot of the car in a tote bag. When the family later moved to a homeless shelter because they'd been homeless living in a car, Montgomery then hides Harmony's body inside a ceiling vent, which clearly shows that he has absolutely no intention to be caught for her killing. Now, the state actually said when investigators returned to that room 2 years later, they did indeed see bloodstains in the ceiling vent. They also smelled decomposition. And after neighbours had begun to complain about that smell that must have been emitting at the time, Montgomery reportedly brought the bag with Harmony's remains to work with him every day. So at this point, Montgomery was actually working as a cook and dishwasher at the Portland Pie Company. And people said he would bring this bag in, and it stood out to people because he would constantly place it in the freezer during his shifts. A worker said he brought it with him regularly to work. He stored it in a freezer where the company kept food and ingredients. Sorry, it makes me want to be sick thinking about that. Can you just conceive of what I'm saying right now? This guy is bringing the dead body of his daughter, decomposing, into a food place and storing it in a freezer with food. And of course, people must have looked and thought, what the hell's going on? I don't know about you. It would have lasted about 5 minutes before I'd opened that bag. Honestly, I'd have found a reason to go in and I'd have opened it. Is it just me? I think it's probably not just me. But I would be thinking, why is this guy doing that? And I would certainly be going over and going, Adam Montgomery, what have you got in the bag? Why have you got this bag here? Don't be bringing this bag here and putting it in the food. It's weird. At the end of the day, that just speaks to me of something sinister. But people literally saw him bringing that in and out. And obviously, I would imagine at least the vast majority of them couldn't possibly have imagined what the bag contained. I genuinely think if you interviewed all the people who worked with him, there would be one person who was like, I genuinely thought there was something in there that was just totally untoward. But people don't like offending. People like to believe the best in people. And clearly they were believing the best in Adam Montgomery when he was literally bringing Harmony's body into work. And at some point, apparently, he kept Harmony's remains inside a red freezer box with a white lid, and that helped him again to move her from place to place. Could you be any more disrespectful to the body of this beautiful little girl? It is just incomprehensible to me. Now, Montgomery is highly aware that he has got this body of his child with him, and it's getting to bother him. So he's starting to talk to Kayla about how he's going to get rid of Harmony's body. And she says to investigators around March 2020, this is after he and Kayla have actually moved to an apartment on Union Street with their children, he starts saying, listen, I need to get rid of Harmony's body completely. I need to make it so that nobody can essentially tie her death to me. She tells investigators that he discussed using a saw to cut her up. He also discussed using lime because that's going to help decompose the body so that she can't be found. And he absolutely believed, according to Kayla as well, that if there was no body, there was literally no evidence and he could get away with it. How can you walk the streets knowing you killed your child? How can you breathe without feeling the agony of that loss? How can you look in the mirror and believe that you deserve your freedom? These are the questions that keep me up at night when I talk about perpetrators like Adam Montgomery. I just feel that the evil within his central core is running through all of his veins at this moment in time. So what Kayla says was he took the bag and then he took Harmony's remains and he added lime to the bag. And the reason for that was he thought it would eat away anything that was left of her. He did all of this in the bathroom. Apparently he spent most of the day there. He then took Harmony's frozen remains at that point, put them into the tub, ran the water to manipulate what was essentially left of her body. And this is all to compress her into a scenario that's going to make it easier for the lime to eat away of it. Now, Kayla Montgomery apparently walks inside the bathroom during this process and sees Montgomery doing this. And she said that in that moment, she saw that Harmony was just largely skin, bones, and fluid, and that the little bits that were left of Harmony, he was now trying to dispose down the drain. So he literally didn't want any evidence to be present that could tie her death back to him. But again, what are we talking about? We're talking about a man, apparently a father, who's got other children as well, being able to deconstruct, dismember, totally throw away, even put down the drains, the body of his own daughter. That is unspeakably evil.
You said that Harmony's body was beginning to smell and that it was horrible.
Yes.
What did he do?
When he took her down from the ceiling and brought her into the bathroom to put her in the garbage bags, he asked me to bring the bag to his job.
How did you get there from the Families in Transition shelter to his work?
I walked.
And where was the bag at that point?
In the stroller.
Was anyone with you during that walk?
My 2 kids.
Why did you obey the defendant when he told you to bring Harmony's body in that bag to his work?
Because I was scared.
You said you're aware of what he did with her body at his work at the Portland Pie Pizza Company. How are you aware of what he did with it, Kayla?
Because he told me that he put her in the freezer.
And then, apparently, he rents a U-Haul vehicle. And of course, this is so he can transport Harmony's body and get rid of whatever is left. Now, court records state that a 2019 GMC Savannah cargo van was actually rented under the name of Brendan Middleton. This was from a U-Haul facility located at 515 South Willow Street in Manchester, New Hampshire. Now, Middleton was told by his friend, a guy called Travis Beach, that the purpose of taking the van was to move furniture or something along those lines. That's according to the court documents. Now, Beach was supposed to rent the van for Adam Montgomery, but basically couldn't because he didn't have an ID or debit card, which is why his friend did it for him. Also, when Montgomery actually asked Travis Beach if he could rent that vehicle for him, he said, I fucked up, I fucked up, I fucked up. So from what I've said so far, you can see Adam Montgomery had this really methodical approach to prevent law enforcement from ever finding Harmony's remains. And it succeeded. Harmony's body has never been recovered. Never. And they haven't found her. They haven't been able to bring her back to her mother. They haven't been able to bring her back to people who may not have been perfect in her early years, but who loved her nonetheless. And I'm going to be clear at this point that I am very judgmental towards Kayla. I really am. I can appreciate, and I will go through to address balance and make it clear that I do see the other side of this. But for me, it is unbelievable that she stayed silent for over 2 years following Harmony's death. She had children with this murderer of a child. Those children could have been at absolute risk because he clearly didn't have boundaries and was willing to abuse and murder a child in front of her. Why didn't she act? Why didn't she report what happened to anyone else? Why didn't she immediately, when the police got involved in this case, say, yeah, I know exactly what happened? Now, her main argument was that she feared for her own safety and for the safety of her children. Adam had a violent past. He had issues of being erratic. He had a very short temper, particularly apparently when he was under the influence of drugs or he was in high stress situations. Going to throw it out there, Kayla. Go and tell the police what is done. Then he'll be removed. Won't have to worry about that. It could be that she thought, listen, if I speak out, it's going to put me in immediate danger. He could kill me because I've seen him kill a child. Again, Kayla, pop off to the police. Give a call to 911. Let them know what's happening. It'll all be sorted. You won't have to worry about it. Also, it kind of served her economically not to tell the authorities about the fact that her partner had murdered his child because she was still getting those welfare benefits like food stamps in Harmony's name for more than a year after Harmony had died. So we can clearly note that there was an economic benefit for her. She liked taking drugs. That made it easier. I really struggle with her willingness to be complicit in the covering up of this little girl's death. It blows my mind that a mother who apparently has children and loves children, which is what she claims to do where these children that are biologically hers are concerned, I cannot believe that she would willingly and knowingly allow him to get away with the murder of a child. Kayla's silence effectively allowed her to exploit the welfare system while concealing the truth of Harmony's death. It's as simple as that. Now, fortunately, that welfare charge is the thing that was brought against her. And that basically meant that in the end, she sung like a canary. But I think it's fair to say that Kayla Montgomery may have been quite happy to carry on as she was if she believed they were not going to get caught and if they hadn't got caught. It's only because they have been caught to some degree that she's told the truth. And she was there the whole time that he was taking those extreme measures to dispose of Harmony's body. So I personally think that Kayla likely would have trusted that Adam's actions would be effective in covering up the crime, and she may have believed that maintaining the fabricated story about Harmony's whereabouts would just allow them to avoid any repercussions. Like I said, it's only after her arrest on welfare fraud charges and when she's facing legal pressure that Kayla Montgomery suddenly remembers what the truth is and chooses to cooperate with authorities. So because she reaches that plea deal, she avoided the further criminal charges directly relating to Harmony's death by providing that crucial testimony against Adam Montgomery. Now, bear in mind, you're not going to be happy, guys, with the sentence that she got. She got 18 months in prison for perjury. She was, of course, a very helpful central witness in the trial, but I think she did a hell of a lot more than she is given credit for in this case. And essentially 18 months feels like poor justice for Harmony, as far as I'm concerned. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, of course, Adam Montgomery, Mr. Superior, aloof, and there's nobody's going to be able to pin me for this crime. I'm just such a clever person. Yeah, I mean, he isn't, is he? He gets charged with second-degree murder for recklessly causing Harmony's death by repeatedly striking her in the head. In addition, he faced charges related to tampering with evidence and, of course, abuse of a corpse because of the actions that he took to hide and dispose of poor Harmony's remains. So we get to the trial. It takes place at Hillsborough Court, Superior Court in Manchester, New Hampshire. It spanned from late 2022 through to early 2023. And of course, Adam Montgomery pleads not guilty. I mean, we expect it by now, don't we? Totally not guilty. I'm not guilty at all of any of the charges relating to me about the death of my daughter, who just disappeared. She just disappeared. Simple as that. It just happens. It happens all the time. If you've seen any magic shows, they just wave that wand, bit of smoke, disappears. That's what happened. I've had nothing to do with it. I'm totally innocent. We know the way it works in these cases. These absolute predators always play the same handbook. Now, it's good in this case that he wasn't just being charged with murder, he was also being charged with the endangerment of a child from the other abuse charges from 2019. They were the ones he was initially arrested for because this guy deserves the book thrown at him. So let's get as many charges in there as possible. And I genuinely feel that all the way through this, he absolutely believed that the jury would struggle with pinning him to the crime because of the lack of evidence. And I genuinely believe that he felt there was enough reasonable doubt that would mean that he would walk free. So I think that he goes into this with that, again, superior, aloof mindset where he thinks that the jury are going to be like, oh, well, he says that she just wandered off somewhere else. And now he doesn't know where she is. But that's all. He's just a bit of a useless dad, not actually a killer. I genuinely think that he thought the world would work that way. Now, the case was prosecuted by Assistant Attorney General Ben Agati from the New Hampshire Attorney General's office, and this guy's good. I'm going to throw it out there, he's good. He's very emotional in the way he presents, and I like it. Caroline Smith, she represented Adam Montgomery as his defence attorney, and the trial was presided over by Judge Amy Messer. When the trial began at Hillsborough County Superior Court, so many people were intrigued, interested, curious, desperate to find out about exactly what happened in this case because nobody knows what happened essentially to Harmony apart from Adam Montgomery and Kaylin Montgomery. And of course, the question is, who is telling the truth in this case? Now, during the trial, one of the most significant developments was, of course, a testimony of Kaylin Montgomery. So she's now Adam's estranged wife. I'm now estranged from you. I loved you. I thought you were a great guy, but I'm not with you anymore. I mean, I feel like you're estranged from me because it makes you look better. I am possibly estranged from you because it makes me look better, but I'm saying I'm estranged from you now. I'm not somebody who was horrifically complicit in this crime. I didn't help you cover it up, although everybody knows I did. I'm just somebody who's here now being a witness for the prosecution because I'm a really good person. Literally, nobody believes that, Kaylin Montgomery. But she's now standing there giving this evidence as the star witness. Also, with respect, multiple family members did testify about the history of abuse that they'd seen. So Kevin Montgomery, Adam's uncle, he reported seeing Harmony with a black eye back in 2019. Kevin went ahead and told the court that it was devastating to see what was happening to Harmony, that she'd been bashed around the house. That's how she'd got the black eye. Other family members, such as Michael Montgomery. Now, Michael Montgomery is Adam's brother. He went ahead and said, yeah, this happened. He said Adam Montgomery is violent. He was very strict. He was very aggressive when it came down to the treatment of Harmony. And so they're painting a picture which is really powerful for the jury, where this man who's pretending he's not guilty, this man who's saying, well, I don't know what's happened to my daughter, this man has actually been seen by direct family members being highly abusive. Now, of course, we have the issue. There is no body. They haven't found her body, but the prosecution still are able to present forensic evidence. This includes DNA samples and blood evidence found in the areas where Harmony had been living. There were specific items brought into court, such as a pink toothbrush, sections of a bloodied ceiling wall, which contained traces of Harmony's DNA. This will be where her body was stored. And as we know, decomposition means that the body becomes fluidy and blood and bodily fluids leak out. So they were able to bring that in. And they're, of course, critical in establishing that Harmony had suffered significant physical trauma while she was in the care of Adam Montgomery. Now, the timeline of Harmony's disappearance and Adam Montgomery's failure to actually report that she was missing. That's key as well, because that's showing somebody who's highly suspect or highly negligent. Either way, it doesn't look good for him as a human being or an apparent father. Also, the welfare fraud. They brought in the fact that Kayla Montgomery is continuing to claim benefits in Harmony's name, and so that means that they're actively hiding the truth, because if she's with the mother would be doing that. So the fact that she isn't with the mother and they're claiming for her, evidence is that they know that she disappeared, and she had disappeared on their watch, and they weren't bothered about it. And they weren't bothered about it because they knew where she was gone. She was dead. They also brought in as a prosecution just the conflicting and inconsistent explanations about where Harmony had ended up. That just weakened his credibility in court, saying that she was with the mother when that could be evidence wasn't true, saying that she was with family members, but not actually showing who they were. All of this led to the jury hearing that this man was just a liar. I would say that Ben Agati, the prosecutor, was deeply compelling all through this case, but in his closing arguments, and he addressed the jury directly, and it was very much surrounded just the brutal end and the abuse prior to that end at Adam Montgomery's hands. He said, "The only part of Harmony we have left will be sitting in that deliberation room with you on that pink toothbrush. This part of the ceiling wall that's there, and the other parts of her body, the rest of her torso, her face, her eyes, that smile. Only the defendant, as we all sit and stand here today, knows where they are. And he can't afford to admit to you that he knows where they are, because the evidence contained on them will show that he caused her death. So she won't get the burial that everyone deserves. She doesn't get a headstone in the ground above the head that he battered. She doesn't get to be at peace in death because of what he did, because he can't afford to tell anyone where she is. She doesn't get dignity. She doesn't get peace, because this man says trying to find her is a waste of time, that trying to find her is a waste of taxpayer money. That's what he thinks of her. Now, that statement by the prosecution, it was probably down to a phone call recording that they had of Adam Montgomery, because during the trial, the prosecution called Manchester Police Detective Matthew LaRochelle. He came to the stand, and during a cross-examination, it was a direct cross-examination, the state actually played the recording of a call between Adam Montgomery and an unknown individual, so they weren't named in this case. It took place around the time that the FBI and the other law enforcement organisations were searching for Harmony's remains. This was near the Merrimack River. And on this phone call, Montgomery said, "One dude went to the police and I was blown away." He told the person, this dude was like, "Oh, my friend, he passed away, but he was very cool with Adam. He told me Adam gave his daughter to him to bury by the river." Adam Montgomery on this phone call said they, as in the FBI and everybody else, were digging up the river. I'm like, is this real life right now? They wasted their time. And when the other individual on the phone call said that basically, the authorities are just doing their due diligence, they're just trying to find whether this tip is true, Montgomery said the allegations were outlandish and that the search was a waste of taxpayers' money. He said, "I get it, you're trying to prove a case, kudos to you, but at what cost, man? Just gonna chase down people that fucking call in from Arizona." That's what he said. So basically the prosecution is saying that he is admitting in that phone call that they won't find the body there because in their mind he knows where the body is. But I guess the defence could have argued that that was Montgomery suggesting it was a waste of time because he hadn't killed her. So the guy who'd called in that tip was basically making it up. Of course, the prosecution make it seem as if he absolutely knew the guy was making it up, as he knew where Harmony's body was and it wasn't where that guy had told the police to go and search. So either way, it can be argued from both the prosecution and defence state. Agati also said very passionately that Adam Montgomery looked at his daughter as a nuisance who was an inconvenience. And he actually said this: "This man hit, and he hit, and he hit this thing to teach it a lesson, until he said to Kayla, 'I think I did something this time.' He might as well said, 'I think I broke it.'" He went on to say, He may have genetically donated half of his DNA to her, but he was not her father. Agassi also pointed out that only Adam Montgomery knew the exact location of Harmony's body, arguing that this knowledge was deliberately concealed to cover up the crime. Now, the defense, who was led by Caroline Smith, their argument was, listen, he didn't do it. One of them might have done it, but he didn't do it. So basically, she's saying there's insufficient evidence to say that it was definitely Adam Montgomery who killed Harmony. So Smith basically challenges the reliability of Kayla's testimony, says that the plea deal gave her more motivation to fabricate or exaggerate her account of the events. And the defense basically sought to create this doubt about the timeline, about the specifics of how and when Harmony died. So basically they were pushing the fact that given the lack of physical body, there's not a definitive cause of death. And they're kind of pushing that narrative. You know, you can't absolutely say that Adam Montgomery did this because you weren't there and we have got no evidence of what happened to her because her body's not present. So that's the line they have to take, isn't it? Either blame it on Kayla Montgomery, she's the one who did it, which is definitely what Adam Montgomery was pushing, or just accept that there's reasonable doubt because there is no body, therefore no definitive cause of death. Now, after all that evidence was heard, after the jury go away and think about whether they believe that this man is indeed guilty or if there is reasonable doubt, fortunately, the jury in New Hampshire came back and found him guilty of second-degree murder, second-degree assault, falsifying physical evidence, abuse of a corpse, and also tampering with witnesses. Now, bear in mind, Montgomery maintained his innocence throughout the whole of the trial. He refused to cooperate. He refused to reveal the location of Harmony's remains. He rejected a reduced sentence, in fact, in exchange for that information. And no doubt because of all of those things, he was found 100% guilty. Now, when it came down to the impact statements, it was really interesting for me. They actually allowed a victim impact statement to be brought in from Kayla Montgomery. And I found it really challenging to listen to. I'm sure you will do. Now, when it came to victim impact statements, I really struggle with the fact that Kayla Montgomery gave one because I don't see her as a victim in this case. I'm just throwing it out there. You can all let me know if I'm incorrect, but I think that Kayla Montgomery is highly complicit and got away with this very, very lightly when you consider her actions. So she basically spoke to the court and said Adam Montgomery would always have a place in her heart. I mean, why? Is your heart made of ice? This is a man who murdered his child in front of you. What are you saying? She also talked about how for 5 years she was so proud of him because they were sober and he was so good and he was a great father to their children. I mean, what? She also, she really respected how he fought for custody of Harmony and how excited they were when they brought her home before he immediately started to beat her to a point where his family members were actually telling authorities about it. Yeah, he sounds like a dream. He sounds like the perfect kind of guy. And she kind of blames it all on relapse. Oh, it was all the relapse. We just spiraled into chaos. Did you? Did you spiral into chaos, Kayla? Yeah, we spiraled into chaos. And Kayla, do you take any responsibility? Not really. I just loved this guy and he was really nice and then he was really not nice and then he spiraled into chaos and it wasn't really my fault at all and I just got 18 months and I'm not really in trouble. I'm a victim. Honestly, I have no patience with this woman whatsoever. Am I being judgy, guys? Probably I'm being judgy. I don't care. I don't care. Harmony deserved better and she ended up with these two individuals who just did everything in their power to not take responsibility for something absolutely heinous. But yeah, there you go. She's doing her victim impact statement, telling the world that she's a victim, telling the world that actually he was super great. And if it only hadn't been for the drugs, everything would have been fine. No, drugs don't make you a murderer. Drugs may make you do things that you would not wish to do, such as commit petty acts of theft, get yourself into situations sexually you wish to avoid if you were sober. It doesn't make you kill a child. It doesn't make you kill a child on any level. What in the world is she on about? Oh, it would have been fine if he hadn't taken the drugs. No, it wouldn't. He's a violent criminal who's nasty. He's been domestically abusive in prior relationships. He's a horrible excuse for a human being. Now, Crystal, of course, Harmony's mother, who was lost greatly in this case, she was amazing. She just said it as it is. She said he was a liar, that he was evil. And she really brought Harmony into the court, talking about how smart she was, how sassy she was, how kind she was. You'll have heard from the clip how passionate Crystal was about her daughter's memory. And the fact that during that she talks about the day that Harmony was murdered, and the fact that she woke up aching from head to toe, as if she was symbiotically, spiritually connected to that child, and she went through the beating that Harmony experienced. And I cannot even begin to imagine how it is for the mother, who feels that no doubt she failed her child initially, and then when she wanted to bring her back into her life, couldn't because it was too late. That must be an absolute burden to carry. When it came down to the sentencing, Judge Amy Messer sentenced him to 45 years to life for the murder, also another 11 years for the convictions of second-degree assault, falsifying physical evidence, tampering with witnesses, and abuse of a corpse. So hopefully Adam will never walk our streets again, ever, anywhere in the world. Hopefully he'll never take a breath of freedom ever again. Hopefully life inside will be problematic because it's not great when you're a child killer, particularly when you're a child killer of your own child, because my God, if ever there was an abandonment of care, of compassion, of humanity, it lies in a relationship betrayed in such a way. But of course, Adam Montgomery doesn't feel that he deserves that. So it won't surprise you to know that on June the 5th, 2024, he's asked for a review of his sentence of 56 years to life because he's not happy with it. Now, that application will be reviewed by 3 members of a sentence review board, and it can be done with or without a hearing, and that review could actually result in an increase or a decrease to the sentence, or there could be no change. So is there a chance that I can sit in on that? Is there some kind of volunteer program? Is it, hello? Yes? Hi, it's Emma Kenny here. Hello? Yeah, I was just wondering, you know, like those review boards where you decide whether somebody gets a longer or shorter or the same sentence? Yes, I do know of these. Yes, I was wondering if I could just come and get involved in Adam Montgomery's. Are you involved in any way, shape or form in the American justice system? No, but I think on an equal opportunities human rights level, I should have my feelings, thoughts and desires heard. Yes, I suppose invoking human rights is potentially something we could look at. I just want to come to say that Adam Montgomery needs his sentence extended. I'm just going to Google that. Oh, let me see what I can do, Emma. Thank you very much. All I'm saying is that anybody with an inch of compassion in their heart would say, let's just give him life without parole. Just throwing it out there. If anybody's watching from that board, life without parole, you'll note in the comments that a lot of people agree with me. Now, bear in mind, what's really sad about this case, aside from the obvious, is I bring back Blair Miller. Blair Miller and his family. The man and his husband who wanted to bring Harmony into their fold. The Millers would gladly have adopted Harmony. She would have been reunited with Jameson. It would have kept the siblings together, as they should have been. Jameson's just a little boy. Now, he's aware that his sister is no longer on this earth. He's aware that she's dead. But obviously they're shielding him from all those gruesome details of the abuse. What is positive is that the memory of Harmony still lives on in their household. And in fact, they honour her every June the 8th. On what had been her birthday. So they are making sure that she has a place in their home and in his heart. And that is just such a powerful and important legacy for that boy to have, to know that he was adored by his big sister and that she wished she could have continued to adore him, but that was stolen from her. Now, reforms have since been implemented because they have to address the huge gaps that Harmony's case has exposed. So Massachusetts and New Hampshire have improved their child welfare protocols. Too late, of course. They now require more rigorous evaluations and follow-ups in cases of parental custody disputes. Also, both states have signed a memorandum, and that memorandum is to ensure a clear pre-existing relationship between a child and a parent before custody is granted. No shit, Shirley. Should that not already exist, that protocol? Should it not just be part of the reality of such an assessment that if the child doesn't have a relationship with that parent, you don't just throw that child there? Could that not create a whole heap of trauma at the very best, and at the worst, put them into abusive situations, as I've highlighted here today? Now, they're going to make sure there are home studies and they're going to verify the relationship before that happens. Also now in New Hampshire, welfare agents are now obligated to actually see children directly and conduct interviews separately from parents. No shit, Sherlock, again. So are you telling me that you actually have to see a child to actually see if they're all right? And when you interview them to see if they're all right, not do it in front of a potentially abusive parent who might stop them from saying what they want to say? Are you actually saying that that didn't happen before this? Their argument is, oh, well, now we've learned, hopefully it will prevent situations like Harmony's happening again. Ridiculous. Those fleeting assessments should never have been protocol. They're ludicrous. Now, that case has obviously sparked a massive debate about federal legislation, and they are pushing for more stringent requirements across state. The aim is to have systemic change where you can protect vulnerable children. I cannot believe that I've even had to say those things. The idea that they weren't speaking separately to children who were in situations where they might have needed to tell them confidential information that they were afraid to say in front of a parent is blindsiding. The idea that there didn't need to necessarily be a relationship between the parent that the child's being sent to and that child is blindsiding to me. It makes no sense. Like I said, one of the things that remains is Harmony's memory. Her mother, Crystal, obviously misses her greatly and wishes that things had been different. Blair Miller's family, they are keeping her in the home. They also are now working closely with lawmakers, are trying to make policy changes. And the whole premise of that is to ensure that no child suffers the same fate as Harmony. A fate that could have been prevented if Blair and his husband and, of course, their beautiful boy, Jameson, had been allowed to bring Harmony into their fold. A fold that would have led to her having a happy, healthy, thriving childhood. A childhood that was denied in the most brutal and grotesque of ways by the very man who was meant to protect her, Adam Montgomery. Seriously, rot in hell, Adam Montgomery. Rot in hell. Let me know your thoughts on this, guys. Take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, and I'll see you next time.